Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Weisenbaker, and welcome to the NSIN Grand Challenge for AI in support of the Air Force Research Laboratory, AFRL. This challenge series, for those of you who weren't able to join us for the first time, is intended to challenge participants to develop competent AI players for theater-scale, multi-domain operations using the gaming platform Command Modern Operations. With us today, we have a very technical panel with us today who can answer all of your questions, deep dive into the game, into the challenge itself. We'd like to introduce Iain McNeil. Iain McNeil has worked with computer war games since 1991. He has held every position from QA to designer and CEO. He has built the Slitherine and its partner company Matrix Games into the largest specialist wargaming publishers in the world, delivering entertainment software to consumers and professional simulators to defense. He also consults for dstl and is the UK industry representative to NATO MSG 189. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. McNeil.
Oh, thanks for having us, guys. We're really excited about this whole competition. It's a really good opportunity.
Additionally, today we have with us Dimitris Dranidis. He's worked in software development and IT since 1999, in business ranging from tiny family shops to multinational conglomerates. He has created Command in the mid-2000s and has led its development and evolution ever since, growing it from a niche war game to a premier cross-domain modern operations simulation throughout the US DoD and NATO. He has served as a mechanized infantryman and military IT staff, and he currently manages the development of Command and related professional activities with Matrix Games. We are extremely excited to have you here today with your technical knowledge, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Additionally, for those who were able to attend the last AMA, we have with us Dr. Jeffrey Hudak. He's a senior computer scientist at the Air Force Research Laboratory, specializing in artificial intelligence and multi-agent systems. And we have Dr. Seversky, who is the Autonomy, Command and Control and Decision Core Support Technical Competency Portfolio Lead for the Air Force Research Laboratory. So a lot of really great people here on the panel today. There's a lot of knowledge here. And so we appreciate you taking the time to come with us today. This will run from 1 to 2. So we'll do a few housekeeping rules, and then we'll run over some initial questions from myself, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. For those of you who are participating, you can see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. And from there, we'll be typing in your questions, and then we'll be able to present those to our panel to answer. So please don't use the chat function for your questions, but please do use the Q&A. That allows us to record the answers to the questions themselves if you use that function. So a few housekeeping things, just as a reminder to everybody, May 22nd, this coming Saturday, is the registration deadline for the Command license request through AFRL. There are links included in the Eventbrite page, as well as on the NSIN website, to be able to access that Airtable form. So please, if you have not already, and you would like to have a Command license request, please go through and fill that out. The overall registration deadline, if you do not need a request, but you just want to participate and you have your own license, is June 14th. And then on July 5th, the submission packets will be due. We'll be emailing the specific requirements of that submission package to everybody about where to put the information and how to submit. We'll have secure drop boxes for you to do that so that your IP is protected, and we'll include all of that as coming up. And then on July 26th, we will announce the winners for the $100,000 prize, as well as the other opportunities that AFRL has presented. So with that, we've got a few initial questions for you, and then we'll open it up to the participants. And please feel free, if you'd like to answer these questions, to take yourself off mute, and we'll figure it out together. These are not directed at a specific individual, but for the entire panel. So the first question, we've actually got this a lot with the previous AMA, is how many instances of Command can be run at once in a single instance? So if you do have the professional license for the game, is it a 1-for-1? So one instance of Command for one machine, or are you able to run multiple instances of Command on a given machine for faster training?
From a technical point of view, you can run as many instances of Command as you like, as long as you've got the hardware to do it. But you get one instance with your professional license, and then you can get what we call AI instances, or additional mini licenses. So they're much cheaper, but they do need to be acquired separately, and that would be up to you guys to work out with AFRL how many, if any, of those are to be supplied. And I think that's really a question for Jeff, I think.
Okay. And so, but you do have to have the professional instance of Command Modern Operations in order to run those AI instances. You couldn't buy a game off of Steam, for instance, and use those same AI instances.
No, the versions you can buy from Steam, they are not the Command Professional Edition. They're the commercial version, and you cannot do any of the things you'd need to be able to do to take part in the competition.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, that's good to know. And so we'll, and again, for everybody, we're recording this, so we'll be sure to follow all this up with a video to everybody. For the second question, are competitors restricted to Lua? If they really wanted an interface in another language, how difficult would it be for the participants or for the AI creators to create one? Oh, Dimitris, I apologize, but you're still on mute.
Oh, apologies.
There you go.
So Lua is the only choice at the moment. It really depends on what platform they would like to use for their scripting needs. If, for example, they prefer to use C# or .NET in general, because Command is internally programmed using the .NET framework, that would be easier to add. It's not currently available, but it could be an additional request. Like I said, Lua is currently the only language supported by the scripting API.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So when in doubt, just go with Lua at the moment.
Correct.
Okay. So for our third question then is, how much faster than real time can Command run? So if they wanted to buy these AI agents and really like do some deep training with their AI agent, how fast can they go? Or is this strictly a real-time event?
Obviously, this depends on the size and complexity of the scenario. Small scenarios, like a few hundred units, they can run very fast, depending on what is happening, who is targeting who and whatnot. Larger scenarios with thousands or tens of thousands of units will obviously run much slower.
Okay.
As a measure of performance, though, I should mention that Northrop Grumman recently used Command Pro for the Game Breaker project. It was assigned by DARPA. And they have stated that as part of their work on that, they ran 200 quadrillion variants of a scenario. So that gives you a measure of the performance that one can expect. Of course, we don't know details about the hardware that they use for that. So there's still the question of that.
Goodness, I love living in the age that we do, that we can do things like this. That's simply amazing.
One of the other things related to this is it depends which kind of license that AFRL are going to supply as well. So the standard edition license, which I think the competition is going to be run on, do not support command line interface. And so the command line interface runs obviously much, much quicker. And so if they were going to provide the professional edition, it would run much faster than the standard edition. But that's, again, a kind of a licensing question for AFRL.
Okay. And for the individuals or companies who want to kind of circumvent the AFRL license, since there's only a limited number of licenses, if they want to go and just buy their own, spend the money, is there a particular license that you'd encourage them to buy for this challenge?
Well, the premium license is the one that confers the ability to run the command line interface, which offers that level of performance. So obviously, this is the one that we would recommend in such a case.
Okay, that makes sense. So for our fourth question then, Command allows you to control units directly or assign them missions. When would you recommend someone, the player or the agent, to create a mission instead of directly controlling the unit?
In the context of automated control, you use a mission when you basically trust the crew AI to do their job on their own. And the same goes, of course, for player manual control. You would manually control a unit through the scripting API when you want very fine-grained control. There have been cases of players using Lua scripts both for theater-level mission assignment and shuffling of assets between them, but also for fine-tuning their tactical control and essentially micromanaging its unit. There are pros and cons to each situation.
Okay. Okay.
There's no single perfect answer, regardless of the tactical situation.
Okay. And so well, that'll be something we'll find out. So we'll be able to test and see with the different ways participants approach this challenge, which one works and which ones don't. Okay, so, and as my final general question, and then we'll open this up to the Q&A section. Where can people go for technical information about Matrix Games and the specific instance of Command Modern Operations outside of this AMA? Is there any documentation or resources that are available to the public if they do have general or specific questions that they could look up?
Well, for the context of AI scripting and control, we actually have a site which is dedicated to the Lua API. I think you guys already have the address, but I can bring it up if necessary.
I think we do, but just to be safe.
Yeah, just paste a link into the chat if you can,
Yep.
or is that the best place?
I'll just paste it there and you can see it. There's a detailed list of the currently available functions and how they work. The API uses both flat structure of functions and also specific object proxies. So you're able, for example, to get a proxy object that represents a unit or a weapon or a subcomponent. You can query status, change status, and so on and so forth. There are certain functions which are meant to be used only in the context of God powers. So, for example, if you're an empire, the war game, and so on. And there are other methods and proxies which simulate what the player will have access through the user interface. So, for example, there may be a method that obtains information on a unit that you would only get if you were a player. And there's a superset of this, that of the same function, that gives additional information and abilities for the unit that will be only available if you are the empire or the scenario editor, etc.
Okay, incredible resource, everybody. So if you can save that link that was just posted in the chat, that'll be an excellent resource for you going forward. Okay, and with that, I'd like to open it up to the Q&A function. So if you do have specific questions that were not already answered in the five first ones, which I'm sure you do, please go ahead and post those in the Q&A, and we'll get through as many as we can with the time allotted. So we'll be ending this about 2 p.m. Eastern time, so we have about 45 more minutes, and then we'll be wrapping up for the day. So to start with those questions, I can pull them up here. So the first question is, do you offer the professional license for purchase, especially for this event? If I want to use the license for further research in university, how shall I get an extension? Does that mean that the professional licenses are time-stamped, that you can only use them for a certain amount of time? Or if you buy it once, does it last for as long as you?
The professional licenses have got a duration, so you can either purchase them quarterly or annually. So I think, Jeff, I'm not sure if they've made a final decision, but it's probably 3 or 6 month licenses that are going to be issued for the competition. So you'd be able to use a license for the duration of that. Whether AFRL put any restrictions on what you can do with it, I'm not sure. But if you wanted to use it beyond then you need to either go back to AFRL or come to us directly to extend your license.
And how would somebody go? That actually goes nicely into the second question right beneath that. How would somebody go about contacting you directly to purchase the pro license if they don't want to go through ARL?
They can just contact, we've got an email address you can come into, so I can just put the email address, but it's pro@matrixgames.com, where that comes into, puts you into the contact with the sales team. That's probably the simplest way. So I'll just type that into the chat, actually.
Okay. Okay, so then for the next question in the chat is there a flight dynamics model for the aircraft/air weapons in game? If so, where can we learn more about each model?
The answer is yes, there is. The answer to the second question is, what exactly do you want to learn? We're not about to start throwing source code in here.
Good point. So Adrian Pope, if you would like to put a specific question in regards to where can we learn more about each model, we'll see if we can get that answered for you. So from Lee from Primordial Labs, I have a question about the game clock rate. Can you programmatically speed up the game clock rate, not UCT time in game? Also, is there a pause/resume capability in the Pro API?
On the second question, I can immediately answer yes. On the first one, speed up the game clock rate. If it means the time compression, yes.
Okay, which I believe refers to what we were talking about earlier with running a lot of instances really fast, depending upon your hardware.
Yeah, by default, when you run the simulation in the command line interface, it doesn't execute in real time. It just runs the simulation as fast as possible. There is, however, the ability to pause, query the simulation, and resume.
Okay, I believe that it does answer the second question, that it's a pause and resume capability. So that is present. Good. Are there any plans to have a Python API? Believing how you answered earlier with the Lua, I don't believe that. I believe the answer to that question is no.
There are many plans, but none of them are as immediate as to cover this specific project.
Okay, so they need to stick with Lua for the scope of this challenge. They should probably stick with Lua. Okay.
It is, however, possible to connect to the Lua API through a TCP socket interface, and the calling client can be in any language, can be anything from C# to Lua itself, to Python, to whatever else.
Is there a database of human-played games that can be used for supervised training?
No, not at the moment. We haven't been collecting any information on that, but we do have a huge resource of players. If there was a kind of a need and someone wanted to arrange it, we could ask players to submit their playthroughs and their data. But currently there is no repository for doing that or system for collecting it.
Okay. So yes, there is a link to buy. I don't know. Can the other panelists see these questions as I'm pulling them up too? Yes, there's a link to buy the pro license. You refer to the email that they put earlier in the chat. Are there differences in the Lua API between pro and commercial versions beyond the two pro only functions listed in the API doc?
No, with the exception of certain methods being available only on the professional edition. In other respects, the API functions in the same way, both in the professional and commercial version.
I believe Adrian Pope gave us a follow-up question to the earlier one about the flight dynamic models. So in regards to the flight dynamic models, can you speak to the level of fidelity, please?
No, I cannot.
Very good.
On the kind of the realism and the validation and verification, we have had service engineering in the US. They spent around 2 years doing V&V on command for the Air Force Research Laboratory. We don't get to see the reports that come out of it because they're classified, but if you have any relationship with them, then you might be able to get more information about the accuracies from service.
Okay, very good. For those who have those relationships, please feel free to reach out. For this question, which informations will be available in game? Do we have information about GPS or moving speed of the players?
So this goes back to the way that I described the methods and calls available on the Lua API. Certain methods describe what the normal player would be able to access for information. So as a regular player, you have access to the information of all your units, any allied units, their status, mission taskings, what they're doing, what they're assigned to, etc. Now, if you use some additional methods which are earmarked as special powers, so to say, you get additional information which would normally not be available to the player side. Things like the status of non-friendly, non-allied units, and certain other things. Does this answer the question?
I believe so. I believe so. I believe the next question we have is for AFRL. So David, if you'd like to take this one, from Ross Allen, how are the scenario objectives encoded? Is it a sparse binary win-loss output at the end of the scenario, or are there points scored throughout the scenario and tallied at the end? If this is the cumulative point system, what types of in-game interactions accumulative points, i.e. destroying opponent units, arriving at waypoints, etc.?
All right, that's a very good question. So it's not a binary win or lose thing. There is actually a scoring system. Players win or lose points depending on their actions. And there's a very wide variety of ways that points can be added or subtracted. So there are certain things which are already encoded on the scenario edit level. So things like if a certain unit is destroyed, or units of a certain class or subtype are destroyed or damaged. There are things like units entering into an area or exiting an area, or being able to hold an area for X amount of time, and so on and so forth. But apart from that, the Lua API itself offers the ability to customize the addition or subtraction of points for any given condition. So you can do arbitrary things like, if at time X there are 2 units of that type in the scenario, and the temperature is 35 degrees and it is Tuesday, award that player 2,000 points. So you can base a pretty wild combination of factors that can award or subtract points from the winning score.
The scoring is going to be determined by AFRL, so I'm not sure if they've decided yet how they want to avoid the points, but that's all something that can be done inside the mission design.
Yeah, so I can speak up to this a little bit. So I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself when we began. I'm David Schwartz, an associate computer scientist at AFRL, and I'm working on designing some of the scenarios we're using in the challenge. So we are going to be using the scoring system, and we're going to have a rubric kind of for each scenario of which factors are going to give you points and which don't. Things that are kind of set across the board right now are you'll get points for destroying units and targets that are painted out in missions. You'll lose points for losing your own units, and you'll lose very minor points for munitions spent. So we can kind of get into realms of who can do the missions more efficiently. And we ask that participants don't really change the scoring within the scenarios when we go and hand them out, so that everyone's on the same playing field with scores and we can compare models easily. So along with the challenge, when you get the scenario package from us, you'll get a document that'll be like a whitelist of certain functions that we kind of use to set up scoring behind the scenes, so that you try not to override that and everyone's still on a level playing field.
Okay, so what I heard was, please don't mess with the scoring system to buff the numbers. Go figure. So it will make it much easier for scoring if we do that. Thank you, David. We appreciate that. Another question from Lee from Primordial Labs. Is there any specific documentation for the socket interface in addition to what's already on the command Lua?
There is, but generally we only made it available to professional customers because it is a capability that is not available in the commercial version. So once someone is enrolled into the program and presumably gains access to any of the commercial edition versions, they should be able to get the relevant documentation.
Excellent. Okay, so for those
which also includes connection samples from different programs in different languages.
Okay, so for those who are able to get one license from AFRL, that'll be made available. And if you want to go and buy your own license, it seems that can be made available as well. But for those who do not have the professional license, we'll have to wait. Makes good sense. This is an interesting question. Are there any baseline AIs already available? Has an AI, a deep reinforcement learning similar to StarCraft and Dota agent, been developed for this game, or would this be the first one?
There hasn't been one developed for Command yet, because the kind of games where you have that deep reinforcement learning are generally very, very simple. in terms of complexity. So something like StarCraft, it might be hard for a human to play, but the reason it's hard for a human to play is because it's juggling lots of things simultaneously. It's a time management game. It's not really any complicated strategy going on. Whereas a game like Command, it's more, you've got to have a long-term plan and a strategy, and how it all fits together. It's much less about all the micromanagement. And at the moment, there isn't any AI for a system out there, and that's why there's a lot of these experiments going on to try and create AIs for these systems, because we're kind of at the early stages of being able to manage these kind of things in a proper machine learning, reinforcement learning type way. We did have somebody who wrote a theatre level management in Lua script without any reinforcement learning. They just scripted something. And Dimitris, you know more about this, but it seemed to work reasonably well.
It worked very well, and in fact, I can show you a screen recording from that theater AI prototype.
Yes, please.
So,
do you have the share screen function at the bottom, or do we need to assign that to you?
I think I'm unable to. If you can grant me the ability. Hold on.
There we go. We can see it.
All right, so this is an example of it. So in this case, the Lua agent was able to completely use the mission editor to arbitrarily create missions on its own. So this Lua agent was working both at the theater level, creating missions and assigning assets between them, as you see here, but it was also working on the tactical level, refining the direct control of units. It was able to achieve a much improved kill ratio in air-to-air engagements. And in fact, it was so effective in some respects that we later codified some of those behaviors on the base AI within the simulation. So everything that you see here on the blue side was controlled by that Lua AI agent.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. David, this might be a question for you. With the current scenarios that AFRL's developed, do they lose points for civilian casualties, or is that a function of the game? Are civilian casualties a function of the game?
I'll let that one be answered first, and then I'll tack into what we have for our scenario.
So in terms of civilian casualties, we don't build civilians into the simulation, but through the Lua scripting and scenario editor, you can create custom objects and call it a church or a mosque or whatever you want to call it. And then you can allocate negative points to destroying or intentionally or unintentionally destroying these things. And you can place them around the intended targets to force you to be more careful with how your munitions are used. But it's not built directly into the simulation. It's part of the scenario design.
Yep, and so going off of that, for scenarios where we do have light civilian traffic planned, you will lose points if they are destroyed. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of have asked people to leave the in-game scoring mechanism to us, because we're using that to track if those casualties occurred or not.
Okay, so we will not be using the in-game scoring mechanism that's natural to the command model operations. It'll be a specific scoring system that AFRL is providing in their scenarios. So,
well, the thing is, we provide the scoring scenario, but it uses the in-game counter.
Okay, so in-game counter, but our scenario. That makes sense. Another good question about shooting. So will the possibility of successful shooting in different conditions, weather, movement speed, jet model, etc., be available?
Dimitris, you're definitely better to answer that. I mean, all those conditions are simulated by taken into account by the simulation. So sensors are affected by rain or cloud or whatever, and then the chance to hit is all based on real equations. Dimitris, you explain it better.
So the question is, will the possibility of successful shooting in different conditions be available? So I think the question, the real question is, if there is a difference in probability of hit against the target, depending on the different conditions. First, we need to get the question right. So assuming that this is the question, then most absolutely yes. There's a lot of factors that go on. The kinematics are modeled faithfully. Distances matter. Initiative matters. Think that real-life tactics, like, for example, shooting at long range, even though you are going to have a low probability of hit, but deliberately shooting, even so, in order to put the adversary in a defensive stance and thus obtain the initiative, you can do things like that.
Excellent. The next question, I believe, is going to be for AFRL. So David, are there any limitations on which Lua commands from the API may be used? Oh, I apologize. Want to do the question before that first. Would the scripted AI be available for a baseline for comparison? So will the participants have access to the scripted AI that's already in the game as a baseline comparison for the AI that they will develop, or will they not have access to that scripted AI for comparison?
Every time that you play a scenario and you play against the enemy AI that comes built in the simulation, you're essentially pitting yourself against that. So you can try out different tactics, improve your score against it, your kill ratio, if you will, and gradually improve your tactics. This is pretty much what the creator of that Lua AI agent did in that video that I showed you before. Unless I have completely misunderstood the question.
I think that we don't actually provide an AI script. So the way the system works is at the low level, there's AI behavior. The scenario plan, effectively, the mission plan, is something that the scenario designer will set up at the start for a scenario. There isn't a built-in mission planner at an AI level inside Command currently. And that's one of the things that you guys are looking to build. So there is nothing to compare it against. It's built by a human currently.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Next question. Is there a limitation on how frequently actions can be issued through the Lua API?
There's no limitation imposed by the system. It's a matter of technical limitations. If you try to send, I don't know, 1 million commands per second, and the underlying connection is not able to support that, obviously you're going to have issues. Other than that, there's no artificial limit to the number of queries and methods and commands you can send per unit of time. Obviously, you will get a better result on that if the simulation is paused in terms of throughput, or instead of having it run either in real time or in time acceleration mode.
Okay, that does make more sense. David, a quick question for you. Are there any limitations on which the Lua commands of the API may be used, other from not altering scoring?
Yes, so concurrently with this, we have one of our team members working on coming up with a whitelist of functions that will basically say this part of the API is good to use and this part's off limits. The general rule of thumb here is that you're going to be allowed to use functions that give you information on your units and allow them to perform actions. You won't be able to do things like just randomly spawning more units or creating minefields without having a unit go there first. So the idea is just so that you keep things realistic. And we'll have more information on you as we come down and get that list finalized a bit better.
For those who haven't played the game before, what domains are simulated in command? So from what you showed us, it seemed there was ground, air, naval. Are there things like space domain or other domains they should be aware of?
Yes, yes, and yes, and yes.
Excellent. I personally haven't been able to go deep into the Steam version yet, but that's exciting to see that like a space domain is available as addition to the typical air, ground, and naval.
In terms of domains, it's a real multi-domain simulation, but the current limitation is that the ground units are primarily targets and threats to other domains. You wouldn't use command to simulate a ground versus ground engagement between tanks, but it would do a very realistic ground versus air or ground versus naval simulation. It's just the ground versus ground part is the part that we're working on with the Marine Corps to develop and move that forwards.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. I believe this question was answered earlier, but since it was asked twice, is the academic pro license sufficient for this type of event, or would they have to go with the non-academic pro license?
I just need to look that up. I can't remember if well, it depends what you want to do. So the academic license will definitely let you do Lua scripting. Whether it lets you do TCP/IP socket, I suspect it doesn't. So you might be limited on which of the options you have of integrating with command if you've got the academic version. I'll go and have a quick check.
Okay. And while he's looking that one up, I believe the final question we have for the moment is there any way to play a two-player game? For example, my AI competes against AFRL's AI or some other participant's AI, or can you only play against the scripted AI that comes with command?
Yes, it is possible to have competing AIs. In fact, there have been some sample test scenarios in which different approaches to both tactical and theater AI were pitted against each other.
Excellent. So a scenario in which some of the participants wanted to test their AIs against each other before final submission, they would have the capabilities to do that.
Yes, just with the caveat that in that case, the AIs would be pre-scripted. So both sides will not have the ability to directly interface to control those AIs dynamically. So they would have to basically pre-program them and then hope for the best. Pretty much like you play Robot Wars, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes good sense. So you can't change it on the fly. It's got to be pre-baked before you submit it. That makes sense. Okay, and I believe that was a final
academic
question.
license just checked, and that doesn't come with the. Sorry, on the academic license, the TCP/IP socket connection is not included with that. That's part of the standard or premium license.
Okay. Okay, so they would need to get the professional license from either AFRL or their own purchasing and not the academic version to participate. Okay. Well, I believe that answers all the questions in our Q&A functions for those participants. If you do have anything else, please feel free to put it into the Q&A. We'll give a few seconds for that for any final questions, but if not, we'll then give everybody back a few minutes for the end of their day. And seeing none, I want to thank you both again for AFRL and for Matrix Games for coming today and answering these questions. We greatly appreciate it and helping with this challenge. We're looking forward to seeing all the participants and teams on what they have to offer with the final submission. So again, best of luck to everybody. If you do have more questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Dan Madden through email. And we look forward to seeing what you built. Thank you again for your time. It's greatly appreciated. Any final remarks or closing remarks from anybody on the panel before we go about our ways?
We're just really excited to see what you guys come up with.
And I'll be sure to put my email in the chat for everybody to have, and then we will call it a day. .us. Okay. Oh, wait, apologies. That was a direct message. Let me put it to everybody. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. So looking forward to seeing you all again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a nice day.